What is going on, guys? Avatarmanz here, and I thought I'd go over all of the in-game options and settings for Rocket League and kind of what they do and why I have them set the way I do. So without further ado, I have free play open here just to kind of showcase what each of these elements have and what they do in game. So for the gameplay tab, voice chat and text chat and are pretty self-explanatory. The key selection, though, I'm not sure a whole lot of people know about this, but you can use your oldest key first, your newest key first, or ask me. When you have to ask me, this will pop up a window when you try to open a crate that you can choose which key you want to use. So if you have a decryptor that you want to use instead, or if you want to use a key that only has a one-day timer, that's how you have that option. Your UI scale will change the elements of the screen and kind of shrink them. But keep in mind this also shrinks the size of the text chat, the size of your party chat, the size of your menus when you want to exit game. It will change the text when it says that you scored, and if you hit the ball, got to save or whatever up at the top right. The safe zone ratio will not adjust anything like that, the actual size. It just adjusts the window, the outer edge of the window of your screen. So if there's kind of some safe zone issues with your monitor or something like that, you can kind of shrink that in if there are any issues with that. Horizontal split screen, that's for when you have local multiplayer. Instead of going vertical split screen with a line down the middle and each player being on the left and right, it'll be horizontal split screen, which is a line across the middle from left to right. So you have player one on the top and player two on the bottom. This will change your elements from the imperial system to metric. I'm from the USA, so I use the Scrubtacular imperial system. Disable stat notifications, so that's when you score a goal and it'll have the options, additional details for that on screen. You can just delete that or get rid of that, so I've got that hidden. Hide crates, so that's at the end of a match, obviously. It won't show if you get a crate or not. Hide competitive divisions, so that's obviously at the end of a ranked match. You won't see if you go up a division or down a division, or if you go up a rank or down a rank. So that's really helpful if you're really trying to grind and you're worried about losing all of your rank. It'll kind of take that off your mind. Enable cross-platform play. That's pretty self-explanatory. Colorblind mode. I'm not sure which kind of colorblind mode that is. Whether it's I think it's called Deuteronomy or Trigonomy or something like that. For either like red-green or blue-green or something like that. I'm not exactly sure which one this is, but that's enabled there. High contrast nameplates, so that's for the name tags around the field. So if there's a player down on the opposite side of the field and they go up the wall or something like that, it'll always make sure that the background of their name tag is in a high contrast setting. Then always show nameplates. So if you have this disabled, somebody who is near the ball will have their name tag shown, their full name. But if they drive away from the ball, then it'll have just the arrow above their car. But if you have always show nameplates, this will always show their full name no matter where they're at on the field, which is really nice. I like to leave this enabled I like to leave both of these enabled. That way it gives me a better depth perception and a better pointer about where they're at on the field compared to the ball or compared to me. I'll go over my camera settings at the end just because I can show you in free play. But my controls, I'll go over my key bindings. I'll just kind of explain it to you guys and then I'll go through the tabs. So I use a PlayStation 4 controller and my control settings are as follows. So I've got my X button, my bottom face button as jump, my square, my left face button as air roll and power slide. My triangle, the top one, is my switch camera mode. And my circle, the right one, is when I hold it, I have my save replay button bind to that. My gas and brake are the same thing, my right and left triggers. And then my right bumper, or my R1 is my boost, and then my L1 or my left bumper is scoreboard. And then my rear view camera is actually, I found it pretty nice to look around with my right stick, so I only thought it fitting to have my R3, my right click as rear view camera. And then my voice chat in-game is my select or share button. So that's pretty much it, but I will go through so you guys can see that here. All right, so those are my controls. To kind of go over some of these, so push to talk is pretty self-explanatory. So that's either voice activation or push to talk. I don't use controller vibration, but controller dead zone. So that is how much you need to push your left stick in order to move your car, and how much you need to push your right stick in order to move your camera. So your dodge dead zone is so how much you need to actually push your stick, and when you double tap your jump button, that's how much you need to flip. So if I push my stick very slightly and I press the jump button, you can see that I'm turning, but I'm not flipping. So that's kind of what that dodge dead zone does. Steering sensitivity, so if I turn this up, so this adjusts my acceleration rate of my stick. So right now I'm holding my stick to the left about halfway, and this is about almost a full turn. So right now I'm actually moving my stick from a full left to about halfway left, and it's basically doing nothing. So that's kind of what that acceleration does. It basically makes it so you don't have to push your stick all the way to the left or right or up or down or whatever in order to get full speed. So, and again, it's the same thing on the, so you can change your steering sensitivity separate to your aerial sensitivity, but it's the same thing in the air. So if you change that or increase that, you will turn faster in the air, quicker. Mouse sensitivity, I'm not exactly sure what this does. I think it's just for in the menu system because most people don't have like their mouse movement binded to anything. And then keyboard input acceleration time, that's kind of the same thing when it changes the acceleration rate for when you're holding down a key in order for you to go full speed. My video settings, I play on a 1440p 165 hertz G-Sync monitor, and I play at full screen mode even though I have 4 monitors hooked up to my PC at one time. So because of that, I like to have my 1440p resolution and full screen so I can maximize my FPS in game. If you have vertical sync enabled, that will lock your frame rate to the refresh rate of your monitor. So I'm sure most of you guys will have either 144 hertz or 60 hertz. So if you have VSync enabled, your maximum frame rate will be 60 or 144. So your higher your frame rate in game, the lower the lag you'll have between your controller and your game. That's called input lag. So I like to have that off so I can get higher FPS. Your anti-aliasing, so that's a rendering method to reduce jagged edges in game. That's a post-processing method. So you'll see that when I'm really close to the goal post, it doesn't look that jagged, but if I look towards the opposite goal post, you can see that there's a jagged lines everywhere. So if I actually kind of go off screen here for you guys to see this, if I enable that, it'll look not as bad as if I have it off. And it's very subtle right now because it's a one static image, but you can really tell in game when I'm moving around. So I guess I like to just keep this on because it only hits you about a couple FPS in game depending on what your settings are at. But so that's kind of reduced the jagged edges. So if you really want more FPS in game, just leave that off. Render quality, so that is the overall image. So that's your rendered image on screen, the detail on that. Your render detail, that is a preset for all of these other settings. So if you set this to high quality, the rest of these settings are going to be changed as well. So I like to leave that. I'll just change it to high performance. Or sorry, I was changing the other one. I'll leave this at custom, and I will go through all these settings here in a second. But like I said, Rocket League has a max frame rate of 250 FPS, but there is a file that you can edit that will unlock this, so you can go above 250 FPS if you can get that kind of power out of your graphics card. So during tournaments and things in RLCS, I like to lower my resolution to 1080p and uncheck a bunch of these settings. Then I will get higher than 250 FPS in game, which is really good for my input lag. It makes the game really responsive and really fun to play. So my texture detail, when I'm just playing ranked or whatever else, I just leave these both at high quality. But texture detail is the detail that your car and the ball are rendered at. And then world detail is everything else in the game. So that's grass, you know, the weather, the stands, everything else. I usually leave these. I think world detail is the one that affects your frame rate the most. Texture detail affects it a little bit, but world detail is really where your FPS gain is going to come in if you put this in at performance. So I usually leave these at high quality just because I have a 1080. But high quality shaders. So if you do this, you have two different types of shaders. You have the high quality ones and then the low quality ones. So obviously if you want really good FPS, you just set this to performance and uncheck this box and you'll have really great frames per second. But the game looks not nearly as nice. So ambient occlusion, so that is for adjusting the lights and shadows in the game so that you can see it really accentuates the shadow around the ball here on the right. It'll also affect the shadows underneath the car as well. But I usually leave that unchecked. It doesn't really do a whole lot for the game and image. But depth of field will blend. You can see that the image from the lights, the farther things get away from you, the more they'll be blended versus really looking sharp on screen. So you can see that the stands at the top left are kind of blurred, and it might be hard for you guys to see. But I usually leave that unchecked. If you leave that checked, the jagged edges will be reduced as well. So this goalpost might not look as jagged. But I usually leave that unchecked. Bloom, you can see at the lights at the top, that will really accentuate the lights on field. And also accentuate the back of your headlights and the headlights of other players. But it gives that really glowy effect. Even the boost pads around the screen have that as well. Light shafts is again pretty similar. It will accentuate the light beams from the the sun or the lights around the field. Lens flares is the flares that you get on the actual screen from looking at the sun. Kind of that camera lens effect. I usually leave that unchecked. Dynamic shadows will enhance the shadows of the car and the ball when they're in the air or off of the wall. I usually leave that checked. And then motion blur, that will blend two frames together when you're moving around the screen. So the jagged edges will look really smooth and the game will look really smooth, but some people might not like it. Weather effects, that affects things like rain, the snow, anything else around the field. The weather effects are on the goal or around the pitch. And then transparent goalposts, a lot of people might not know this, but when you have this checked, the entire inside of the goal besides the rim is transparent. But if you leave this unchecked, you'll see that the yellow part of the goal will become non-transparent, and you can see that it'll be really hard to tell if the ball is rolling on the ground right now. You wouldn't be able to see it as much. So it's really nice to just leave that checked. Audio settings, master volume is pretty self-explanatory. That just raises everything. Gameplay volume, that affects the sounds of the engine and the sound of the ball and the boost in game. So I usually leave that pretty high up. Music volume is just the main menu music, and in the April 3rd patch update soon, in a few days, you'll be able to enable in-game music for in-games actually, instead of just in the main menu or something. Voice volume, that's voices of other players and you in-game. Ambient volume, that's the sounds of the spectators and the commentator on the field. So when the Asian dude goes, "Epicusez-vous," that's what that is. So if you disable that, you won't hear that, and you won't hear the audience around you just screaming. Output type, that's for speakers or headphones. I haven't really seen a whole lot of games really affected anything by changing these. So I usually just leave it at speakers. And then chat is just to change your quick chat elements. But going back to the most important thing you guys are here for is probably the camera settings. I've posted my camera settings a bunch in Discord and on Steam, and I've given them on my YouTube channel and everything else. But my camera settings are as follows. You guys can see that here. Camera shake, so that will be when you jump and when you move around the pitch, you can see a slight shake when I land. You can see how the camera isn't very stable, and a lot of people are really ticked off by that when they have spectators like RLCS have camera shake on. It's awful. So you should turn that off no matter what. Camera FOV. So a lot of people have a misconception about camera settings because your FOV actually changes the angle of how far you can see, but it does not affect the majority of your angle on the field. So yeah, it looks, 90 is pretty default in most games, and compared to that, you can see a little bit more on the field, but it's not actually the FOV that gives you the most field of view on the pitch. It's actually your camera distance. So your field of view actually changes the angle of what you can see. So I'm not actually zooming in a whole lot. It's just narrowing how far I can see. So you can see that on the sides, the ball is really distorted. It's really far away. But the second I get it in the middle, now it's not distorted at all. You can really see this, you know, the Rocket League sign on the left there is really distorted. It looks like it's really stretched out. But so that's what that does. But it's really actually your camera distance that gives you the most amount of field of view on the pitch, because now it's actually the distance between the camera and your car. So that's what actually gives you the most amount of distance or most amount of camera on the pitch. So if you really, really want a huge view of the field, change your camera distance high and your FOV really high as well. But I usually leave mine at 250. Camera height, so that's how high up you are compared to your car. A lot of people like that really high up view. But two things that really go hand in hand are your height and your angle. So if you have a really high height, say something like, I don't know, 150, a lot of people like to leave their camera angle up really high as well, like 110. So that way, you know, the higher your height, the higher your angle, you can actually see above the car or above the ball when you're going for like a dribble play. You'll be able to see your opponent over the ball. So that's kind of what those two things go together for. So if you lower yours to like 110 and you lower this to like -3, then you'll be really low to the ground and you'll be able to kind of judge the ball a lot more when you have it in your possession, but you won't be able to see over the ball as much. So those two things tend to go hand in hand. So if you increase your height, you're going to want to increase your angle. So mine is usually at 110 and -7. Or -5, I think I had it at. So the next camera setting is camera stiffness. So this is for when I change from ball cam to not ball cam. And when I move around the pitch when I don't have ball cam on, you can see that my car is pretty stiff on the middle of the screen. So when I move left and right, my field of view stays the same. And a lot of people, when I first started playing Rocket League, I really liked to have a stiff camera because it had a really consistent point of view on the field. But I didn't really like that over time. I didn't like the way I was dribbling. So what I did is I lowered it, and I lowered it to 75, and then I lowered it to 50. Now I think I've got it at 45 or 40. But so your camera stiffness, so as you move faster, you can see how far away the camera is from the car. But if I slow down, look how far, or look how close I am to the car now. Look how close my back wheels are compared to when I'm driving at full speed like this. And when I slow down, my back wheels come really close to the bottom of the screen. So that's what that does. That also affects when you're turning. You can see that when I'm drifting, I can actually see the side of the car, and I can see the side of my back wheels. So that's what that does, is it allows me to, the camera doesn't stick close to your car as much. But I think it looks a little bit more fluid when you're dribbling, so that's kind of why I have that. Camera swivel speed, so that is, if you lower that, so that's how fast you look around the pitch, basically, with your right stick. So if you really want to just get a quick look at where your opponents are at, you can do that. Otherwise, the one that I usually leave it at is 8. And transition speed, so if you leave this all the way at 2, it gets rid of the animation between when you turn on car cam versus ball cam. It really can mess you up, so I mean, I don't really suggest that at all. So I like to leave it at 1.7 just because it's a little bit quicker of an animation. So in a pinch, if you're trying to get a ball that's going backwards, that would really save your butt. Invert swivel pitch, so that's when you are looking up and down. It'll be inverted. It'll swap the inverted controls there. Hold ball camera. So that's, you are always on ball cam unless you hold down your button. Most people have hold ball cam until they switch it. But I wouldn't recommend this because then you need to hold down the button while you dribble, basically. Or while you're not dribbling. So I wouldn't really recommend it. But either way. Ball cam indicator, so that's the indicator on the bottom of the screen. You see I have no indicator for the red text when I have ball cam on or off. It doesn't really matter. But then the ball arrow, so you can see I don't have an arrow at all. But then once I turn that on, it's the arrow next to the ball. You can see that at my right tire, I have an arrow indicating where the ball is at. So that's pretty much it, you guys. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. Avatarmanz, signing out.